You're listening to the 3-Point Conversion.
Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another edition of the 3-Point Conversion with Queasy, Andrew, myself, Jeremy. As today's episode, we go over the AFC North. Let's see, who's got who? I know that Andrew's got the Ravens, Queasy has the Steelers, Andrew's also taking the Browns, and I'll be taking those mighty Bengals. Before we dive into that and we break everybody down, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you send us some questions, give us feedback, and all that good stuff. Let's get to the news.
Here's what's happening around the league. Time for news.
So, got a couple things to go over with some news here. First and foremost, I don't think it's news to anybody, but it's definitely worth speaking on, is the COVID-19 virus, aka the coronavirus, shutting down sports as we know it. If anything, it's very historic in a bad way. I know that they've shut down hockey, they shut down NBA, there's no NCAA basketball tournament, no March Madness. It is March Madness, just of a different variety. It's crazy. They shut down the Masters in golf, which is huge deals historically. They've pushed back spring games for college football. All spring sports they're talking about canceling. So it's real crazy. I know that workplaces are shutting down. Everybody's going and getting toilet paper. I don't know what that's about with the toilet paper. I guess you got to wipe your butt. So, but yeah, it's crazy right now. You guys got anything to say about the coronavirus? I don't know if you guys want to add anything.
Hey, wash your hands.
Yeah, I think it should be noted. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face.
Exactly.
Do the dab sneeze.
Yeah.
And
give me a head nod. That's it. Just
yeah. What's up? Maybe wear masks. We're gonna be full on China over here.
Yeah, all I have to say about it is the entire world has shut down as we know it, but I'll see you guys at work on Monday, Tuesday, whatever.
Yeah. For now, they might shut us down.
For now.
All right, so for some NFL stuff, the new CBA will be voted on tonight, Saturday, March 14th. I think it goes all the way up into midnight. I think right now speculation is, from what I've heard and seen, that it is going to pass, even though we've had several notable people and players come out against it. I think the majority is going to have it passed. And then it rolls directly into the franchise tag deadline. It has to be done by Monday morning. So there's already been a couple that have been franchise tagged that I've seen. Doesn't mean a whole lot now because a lot of people get franchise tagged and they get just means that they can't go and do it themselves, I guess. I saw that Yannick Ngakoue did get franchise tagged from the Jaguars. He's one of the notable ones. There's also been several notable players cut from the NFL for people getting ready. Just a few that I had written down were Deion Lewis and Delaney Walker from the Titans, Xavier Rhodes and Linval Joseph from the Vikings. And there's been several. I just didn't go into all of them. Check that out. So everybody's getting ready, getting that cap space up, and getting ready to go. You guys got anything to add?
What kills me about this is Xavier Rhodes. You're talking about a guy who was selected as a Pro Bowl cornerback. Yeah. Like, how was this guy selected? He was like garbage last season. Like, no wonder he got cut. Like, I don't know. That just kind of irked me a little bit.
Yeah, so the Pro Bowl, and I've seen people like coming out against like, don't use Pro Bowler as an accolade anymore because it doesn't really mean the same thing it did 10, 20 years ago. You know, like no longer does that really signify that this is the best player at the position, which is kind of sad because now it kind of does away with what it should be, which is an accolade. Yeah. Nobody wants to watch that game anyway. It's garbage. Nobody plays.
I mean, one more thing about the CBA. I heard yesterday morning, I believe, on my way to work, that a lot of players were actually looking to change their vote that they had already cast, and they're not allowing them to do so. So maybe this projected yes is coming from that. I don't know who really sets the rules on this, saying you can, you cannot, whatever. Maybe the NFL. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering why they feel this way, or maybe they just jumped the gun and were listening to all the hype. You know, the J.J. Watts out here, the Richard Shermans out here saying, no, I ain't doing this, I ain't doing that, and they just, followed suit and maybe cast a vote they weren't really comfortable with just because of peer pressure. I don't know what's going on, but it's weird.
No doubt. I saw an interview today on NFL Network, and it was, who was it? Like Chris Harris, I think. Don't quote me on that, but it was a cornerback. I was doing other stuff, but he was about to get traded or let go or something, and or be a free agent rather. And he was coming out saying that he thought it was going to pass from what he'd been hearing. So I don't know. I know the one thing. It's time for one of these babies.
Oh, yep.
I did not pre-pour today.
Well, neither did I.
Got mine ready.
The only thing I pre-poured was my coffee.
Queasy is always ready to go with that shot.
Ready.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah, cuz. Yeah.
Cue the music, man.
Woo!
Yeah.
That is not
hair
good
in your chest. Is it not Bailey's?
I need some Baileys.
Need some Bailey's.
Just be sipping.
Just sipping on that Bailey. Here's my shot. All right, so who are we starting with? We're starting with those AFC North champion Ravens.
Them Ravens.
Well, when you're ready, my friend, you go ahead and take it away.
All right, gents. So the Ravens are wild, man. They are an anomaly within themselves. They were 14-2, which is unheard of nowadays. They were first in the AFC North division. Head coach John Harbaugh, offensive coordinator Greg Roman. This was his first season as the Ravens offensive coordinator. He was with the Buffaloes 15-16. Defensive coordinator Don Martindale, second season as Ravens defensive coordinator. Linebackers coach since 2012. Now, this is where it gets wild. I think we all kind of forgot about the Ravens and maybe the last week of the regular season because they were resting all their starters. And then in the playoffs, they didn't play the wild card week. And then they ended up getting beaten by the Titans. And really, they've just kind of slipped all of our minds. But when you listen to some of these stats, it's just insane. They were first in points scored with 531, second in total yards with 6,521, third in turnovers with 15, first in first downs with 386, first in passing touchdowns, which is crazy because it's such a run-heavy team, with 37, first in rushing attempts with 596, first in rushing yards with 3,296, second in rushing touchdowns with 21, first in yards per rushing attempt, 5.5, first in scoring percentage with 52.1%. First in fourth down conversion with 70.8%. Second in third down conversion with 47.1%. And there were more. I could go on and on and on, but I think you kind of get the point. But on the defensive side of the ball, they were almost just as good. Points against, they were third in the NFL with 282. Yards against, they were fourth with 4,809. I'm sorry. Second in first downs allowed with 276. Second in passing touchdowns allowed with 15. And first in rushing attempts allowed, I say that as in the teams didn't really try to run the ball against them. Maybe it was a futile effort, with only 340. So this was a pretty stout team all around. They honestly, I said something in one of our past episodes about another team we covered probably being the most well-rounded in the NFL, but it seems I may have been wrong once I actually started crunching the numbers on these Ravens. It's crazy. Their team is very young on the offensive side of the ball, aside from maybe Mark Ingram himself. Lamar Jackson is 22, and he was a phenom this season. He had 265 completions at 401 attempts for 3,127 yards, 36 touchdowns. 176 rushing attempts for 206 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. Lamar Jackson led the team in rushing, which is pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Ingram had 202 attempts for 1,018 yards and 10 touchdowns, which is not bad at all, especially for a back of his, his age, his years, his wisdom. He also had 5 receiving touchdowns, which I don't think many of us really saw coming. He's more of a workhorse type back, not really a pass catching back, but I think he was put in good situations, and it was just an added bonus for anybody who took him in fantasy draft. Mark Andrews is 23. He's their tight end. He had 98 targets, 64 receptions, 852 yards, and 10 touchdowns. And Marquise Brown, who spent most of the season battling an injury, he's 22. He's a guy I really look for to be a burner in the coming years. And he had 71 targets, 46 receptions, 584 yards, and 7 touchdowns. The fact that he had 7 touchdowns on 46 receptions really kind of stood out to me. That's just not normal.
Yes.
Now, their free agents, they're not really struggling too bad with the guys they're losing. They got $56.1 million to play with. And they've got Jimmy Smith, their corner, Tony Jefferson, their strong safety, Michael Pierce, defensive tackle, Patrick Onwuasor, inside linebacker. That guy's got a weird
Good
try.
Good try.
I'm bad with these names, dog. And Matt Juden, outside linebacker. My handwriting's real bad, too. It's not helping me. Potential targets I'm looking at them going for in free agency would, as you spoke earlier, Jeremy, about Chris Harris. He's an older cornerback, and I covered him on the last team that we did in our last episode. I'm not going to say who that is. Go watch it. But he's 30, 31 years old, something like that. And he's really good for his age, and I don't think you're going to have to sign him to a long contract, but he's a guy I think they could potentially look at going after to really improve this defense, not that it needs much. Corey Littleton, the linebacker from the Rams. We all saw this guy exploding the past couple seasons. He just kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody really heard of him, and he just took their defense and, led them to what they were in their Super Bowl run. Jadeveon Clowney, potentially. We all know who Clowney is, defensive end for Seattle. Yeah. And Amari Cooper, I think. I wasn't seeing a whole lot of hype about this online when I was looking this up, but I think he's a guy that would be a perfect fit for this team, and it really would surprise me for them with the cap that they have not to look at talking to this guy, because really, if this team has a weakness, it's at receiver, and this dude would, if anything, he'd draw a lot of coverage, and he would really open things up for you. In the draft, they have quite a few picks. They have 1 in the first round, 1 in the second round, 2 in the third round, 3 in the fourth round, 1 in the fifth, and 1 in the seventh. And with their first round pick at number 28, I have them looking at Pat Queen, the linebacker out of LSU, or Malik Harrison, the linebacker out of Ohio State University. Either one of these guys would probably be a good fit on their defense. The second round, I have them looking at Solomon Kinley, offensive lineman out of Georgia. Third round, Josian Scott, cornerback out of Michigan State. So really, mostly on the defensive side, mostly on the defensive side of the ball is probably where they're going to be looking. Maybe they might replace a lineman or so, but I think these guys are going to have a lot of fun in free agency. They just have to look not to go overboard, because they're going to have to re-sign a lot of these young players in a couple of seasons, and you got to leave yourself some room there. Fantasy value. The Ravens were loaded with fantasy points in 2019, starting with sleeper quarterback Lamar Jackson. I see him continuing to grow and dominate as a fantasy quarterback next season. Mark Ingram performed very well considering he was a later running back taken off the board. Look for his ADP to rise significantly in 2020 and be wary of it if it goes too high, because he is an older running back, as I stated. Mark Andrews performed very well for an unknown commodity. Look for him to be a top 3 or 4 tight end next season. And Hollywood Brown is my sleeper guy. As far as IDP goes, they really had a strong defensive unit with no real superstars. I did a search for the top 50 IDP candidates from last year, the prospects for coming into this year, and there was not one player from the Ravens defense on that list. So they did very well. They really did statistically, but they're not guys you're looking to take in your IDP draft very high. And I look for the Ravens to go 13-3 next year. Maybe a little bit of a drop off because I don't think they can continue performing at a level quite as high as they were this season. But I still see them winning the division and being very, very good.
Oh yeah.
You guys have anything?
Man, I love the Ravens, but they got to get past that playoff. Just that playoff, they got to get past that playoff. So what do you think they can do to excel them further into the playoffs?
Don't
sit the past 2 years. So
don't sit your starters for 3 weeks.
That's the debate.
I mean, like, sure, you put your guys on the field, you run the risk of injury, but you got to let them play a little bit, man. You got to keep them hot. They had the hot hand all season, and you just let them sit on the bench and let that flame extinguish. I really think that had a lot to do with it. And as Jeremy and I have talked about before, they really got off their game plan because of that. They were playing from behind, and they freaked out and just started throwing the ball too much, and it was just ugly, man.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to give the Titans credit for that, but they rocked them just enough so that the Ravens just fell apart. And hopefully they fix that next season, because I really like this team as a Super Bowl contender. They'd probably be my pick for next season. Sorry, Chiefs, but
be a good game. That AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
If I may add in 2 cents, I do hope, because Lamar surprised me this year by developing so much, and I'm glad he did, and I hope he continues to develop, especially in the passing game. So if they add that, if he increases with his passing game, and also adding in a wide receiver, I think that will help to excel them in the playoffs. Just give them other weapons to go to. That way, it's harder for them to get shut down, like just shutting down their running game. They can go to the passing game or whatever it may be. They'll just help them get further into the playoffs, hopefully to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah, so my take on that whole situation, like Lamar definitely, he came out and he balled out all season, and then I think that argument kind of holds true with sitting your starters. Like, I'm okay with sitting starters to a certain degree, like maybe if they're more veterans. But when you got the younger guys like that, like that's the last thing I would do is sit them. And I don't know if that's what happened, if it was because they sat or what, that they didn't perform up to it. But I know the Titans went in there and ran the football down their throats. They got behind. Lamar Jackson looked extremely rattled when they were bottling him inside the pocket and, held him just enough to where they had to throw a ton. And they just looked panicked as a whole team, honestly. They couldn't stop Derrick Henry, and then they were starting to find their struggles on offense that they hadn't really been dealing with, and they had no answer. But I think that could actually help them in this upcoming season. They'll have that little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And like you said, Andrew, they're not losing a ton of people. So this is basically the same team. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are going to look at that tape of the Titans in that game, but that's one game. He's so athletic, and his passing is only going to get better, that he's so hard to defend that it's a nightmare defensively to try to deal with them. And if they add those players, those pieces, yeah, that's going to be like the greatest AFC Championship game ever, assuming the Chiefs are just as good. It's probably going to be, honestly, your Super Bowl. But aside from that, I don't have a whole lot other than just they were pretty amazing. Yeah. And Lamar Jackson's definitely going to finish top 3, if not the top quarterback in fantasy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's sad. Like I said, because of that game and the fact that they sat the last part of the season, we all tend to forget about the Ravens. But don't sleep on the Ravens. I'm telling all y'all listening right now, these guys are coming back, and they're, like Jeremy said, with a chip on their shoulder. They're probably coming back with a vengeance.
Probably so.
Well, guys, that's all for me. If you guys want to be moving on to our next team.
Queasy.
I have the Pittsburgh Steelers, my second favorite team. They ended the season at 8-8. They're the 2005 Super Bowl champions. So that'll be 6 of them they have, I think, right now. Their head coach is Mike Tomlin, great coach. I always loved him. He always seemed to control his team and excel in his ways. Offensive coordinator is Randy Fitchner. The defensive coordinator is Keith Butler. But for last season, it was a really roller coaster ride for them from the off season on into the complete season for them. During the off season, they had distractions. Antonio Brown, they had to get rid of. He wanted out. They traded him to the Raiders. The Raiders.
The Raiders.
They traded him to the Raiders to get rid of him. He was doing so many things, whether it was filming in the locker room, saying too many. It was just always something dealing with him. They also had Le'Veon Bell, which I may say this on Le'Veon Bell, that I like Le'Veon Bell and I wish they would have kept him. I wish they would have paid him. I think they drug him out too long, but they did let him go, and he went to the Jets, if I'm correct. So that was the two, as they call, distractions there. They also had Ryan Shizer, which was a linebacker, a great dude, had a horrible injury. So they actually had to cut him during the offseason because, of course, there's no way they can come back. But he was a great leader on the defense for them, so that was the beginning of their offseason, just that turmoil there. They get into the season, started off losing. Ben Roethlisberger got hurt. Their quarterback, their face of the team, got hurt in the second game of the season off of a non-contact elbow injury. He has a long history of injuries. But he's a tough guy. But he has a long history of injuries that he's just been going on for years. So he's out for the rest of the season. So in comes Rudolph. Once Rudolph gets in, he actually does a little bit of things. He got them up to 5-5 during the season.
Can we talk about the reason that Rudolph was going down in history?
It's so dumb.
Yes, in week 11, they played against the Cleveland Browns, and he got knocked out because of a head injury, which happened because of Myles Garrett slamming him in the head with his helmet during an altercation. So he got hit in the head with the helmet during the altercation and got knocked out for the season, pretty much. That was
graphic.
Yeah, exactly. They brought in Hodges, which actually brought their team up to 8-8, 8-5, actually 8-5. They did some things underneath him. Remember we mentioned during that game also with the Cleveland Browns, they lost Stephen Smith with a concussion. So now, with all that said, they've lost their top quarterback, their top wide receiver, and all those, again, Antonio Brown, Bell, all these guys, and yet they still have a chance to make the playoffs at 8-5. Then they slid and lost the last 3 games to be knocked out of the playoffs, and that's not known for their team. But all that being said, that is saying a lot towards the coach, because to me, that's saying a lot towards the coach, because that was a team that, with all those injuries, with all those situations, they should have been at the very bottom of the division, if not the conference at all. So, but they did survive in a way to make the playoffs. Their salary cap is $6 million, which isn't a lot at all. Not much they can do. Not many free agents they can bring in. Roethlisberger is actually 17% of the salary, so it's actually hard to bring in anybody yet. It's very high. The Connors is coming back. A lot of fans love him. He's from Pittsburgh. He went to Pitt, but he's starting to develop a injury history himself. He was actually injured this last season. So with that being said, and then their drafts, they can't even develop in the draft because they don't have any first-round draft picks. They have a second-round draft pick, which they may try to even go after a tight end, but that's still not going to help develop your team much, from what I can say. But behind a great coach, I think they will end up the season at 9-7. They will turn around a little bit. Roethlisberger should be coming back. Connor should be coming back if everyone can stay healthy. Juju should be coming back, of course, healthy. So I can think they get the end of the season at 9-7. And far as fantasy wise, what are the needs? I mean, their needs, they do need a quarterback. But again, with no cap space, they can't get anything. They need to definitely develop their backup quarterback. Even though their backup quarterbacks helped to lift them throughout the season last year, they don't have a high ceiling for those guys someone to replace Roethlisberger. They need a running back. Again, they love Connors, but with a developing injury history, they do need to develop backup running backs for him. But again, with the salary cap and no draft picks, it doesn't seem like much is going to happen within the next year. Fantasy-wise, again, barring any injuries, Roethlisberger, Juju, Connor can all just be like mid-tier running backs for those, or mid-tier prospects for the fantasy-wise. So I don't see much changing for them. Just a great history, football history, and a great coach to help push them to a 9-7 season. All right, you guys got anything?
Queasy. Yeah, I got you some. So I have to agree 100%. I know me and you have spoken at length on Mike Tomlin and how he's such a great coach. He really is. And the stuff that has happened off field really sheds light on that, like you had talked about, especially with Antonio Brown and all the crazy stuff he's had going on. Like when you realize that that's just who that guy is, and that's what they were dealing with through all their good years, and him having to manage that and then having him gone. Like you said, I wish they had done different with Le'Veon Bell. I drafted him that year in fantasy, and he screwed me. But yeah, Mike Tomlin, could you imagine where this franchise would be without him leading the charge if they had one of these first couple year coaches? Like, they'd be garbage. Exactly. And Devlin Hodge and Mason Rudolph, like, I know a really big Steelers fan, like really big, and Ryan at work, y'all know Ryan. And he would tell me about how good Devlin Hodge was after Mason Rudolph went out, and I'm like, I don't see that. I think Devlin Hodge even went like undrafted, and they traded away my guy Josh Dobbs before Roethlisberger went down, and you can't tell me that those two guys are better than that dude. And so they may have made the playoffs with him. I'm not saying he's a great quarterback, like great or anything, but
the Steelers are known to draft sleeper wide receivers and develop them great. So they had a lot of great history of wide receivers in there. But with saying that, drafting quarterbacks, they don't do too well. I don't know if they need to evaluate talent better, but every quarterback they've drafted, they seem to get rid of within 2 years. So they haven't found anything to develop behind Roethlisberger yet.
Yes. When I think of Steelers and quarterback, I think Terry Bradshaw, and then I think of Ben Roethlisberger. And you can throw whoever else you want in there. I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but those two guys are real good, but I don't know who else they've ever had.
Exactly.
As far as Roethlisberger goes, and I know you said mid-tier fantasy guys, he used to be one of the best quarterbacks. This has been several years ago, and like you've said and shown the injury histories that he's had. But do you think there's a chance that he could break top 10?
I don't think in the top 10. They've got a lot of young quarterbacks coming up. Roethlisberger's been known through my brother Alan Bug. He's been known to work very, very good at home games, but away games he does terrible. So for him to break in the top 10, he has to break that streak.
Oh, I get you. Did you see that video that had come out a few weeks ago of him like throwing for the first time? He's like in a gym, like maybe the YMCA or something.
I did.
And at first, I see somebody throwing, and I'm like, "Who is that?" He's got this huge beard. He looks like he's overweight, and he's like doing this slow throwing motion. And I'm like, "That's some retired quarterback they got on there." It's Ben Roethlisberger.
Is it Ben Roethlisberger or is it Will Ferrell with a beard?
It did look a lot like Will Ferrell. So, I don't know. It looks like he's got a ways before he gets into some kind of football shape. But I am wondering about how everything's going to come together. That injury history going on.
Exactly. Mr.
Yeah,
Andrew.
The only thing I've really got is, do you believe in the potential of Juju Smith-Schuster to step up with a healthy Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback and be the Antonio Brown for this team?
Wow, that you said two different things there. Do I believe he'll step up? I definitely do. Again, the Pittsburgh has a great history of wide receivers, and I'm not talking about average, but let's say below the great tier. The one great one of the one great ones in their past history, of course, is Antonio Brown, which is I think is a phenom. But with his distractions and other off-field situations, there was no way. But he could have been the best, if not behind, and Rice. But Juju, I think he'll be definitely step up, and I think he'll do well in fantasy and throughout the season, long as, again, barring any injuries.
All right.
I'll tell you what they need. I'll tell you what they need at wide receiver is they need to find that guy, and I don't know who it would be. I mean, maybe Denzel Mims or somebody, but they need to find that Lynn Swann receiver they had back in the day. That he was a good receiver, like obviously a Hall of Fame receiver, but he was his best in playoff games. Like if you go right now and look at Lynn Swann, you're going to see catches, and they're in Super Bowls and playoffs. They're not regular season like, hey, look at me doing this first team. This is biggest stage, biggest show, and he's making crazy plays. That's what they need. They need it bad.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's Juju or not, but they need somebody.
This might be the time to bring in a veteran wide receivers to kind of help stabilize that and help to elevate them within that playoff time.
Manny Sanders.
Hey, bring you back.
Yeah, that would be good.
Bring you back. Emmanuel Sanders. That would be crazy, actually. Bring him on back to the Steelers.
It would be.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead and start them up there, Andrew. The
All
Brown
right,
Nations.
Brown Nation. You boys got your toilet paper ready? All right.
Coronavirus 2020.
Here we go. Cleveland Browns, who surprisingly did not finish last in the AFC North for like the first time in a million years or something.
It's going up.
They went 6-10-0. So they've got all new staff. This is this was a lot to kind of comb through, but I basically got the most important information right here for you. Their head coach is Kevin Stefanski. He was hired the end of last year, the beginning of this year, something. It was pretty recently. Been with the Vikings since 2006. Ran their offense last season, tailored to talent, I noticed. He liked to lean with the run, but he definitely used the wide receivers when he needed to. It wasn't really all that great for your fantasy production on your team, but he helped get the Vikings to wins by using these receivers when they were called upon. Offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt. He was an old backup quarterback back in the day. He was with the Bills from 2006 to 2009, with the Bucks 10 and 11, the Packers 2012 to 2017, and the Bengals 2018 to 2019. He was usually in a quarterback coach role, but he also was a running back coach for the Packers in his first 2 seasons there. Defensive coordinator Joe Woods. He was the San Francisco DB coach last season. I'm thinking that maybe this might point at Cleveland Browns maybe looking at a run funnel defense, trying to maybe slow offenses down a little bit because they were not very good against the pass last season. But we'll see. That's just my guess on it. Whew, Baker Mayfield had a significant backslide from his rookie season. He had 22 touchdowns to 21 interceptions. He was like little Jameis.
Little Jameis.
But let me say, though, I don't dislike Baker Mayfield, but he wasn't good. But I'm putting a lot of this on this offensive line. Dude took 40 sacks for 285 yards. He also had 3 rushing touchdowns, so he used his legs a little bit. Nick Chubb. I'm just moving on from Baker. I don't want to say anything else about this dude. Nick Chubb had 298 attempts for 1,494 yards, beat only by Derrick Henry, and 8 touchdowns. had 88-yard run against Atlanta, which was beautiful. And he was forced, I guess, into a pass-catching role before Kareem Hunt really showed up. That's not really his gig, but he had 49 targets, 36 receptions, 278 yards. He didn't have any receiving touchdowns, though. Kareem Hunt, through 8 games, because of his suspension last season, had 43 attempts for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's kind of ugly, but he was more of a receiving back. So he had 44 targets for 37 receptions, 285 yards, and a touchdown. They didn't really utilize him the same way that the Chiefs did. He was something else with the Chiefs, and hopefully he ends up with a team that can actually use him right. But I don't know. I think he's going to come back, honestly. Jarvis Landry and OBJ, they shared a similar number 1 role. There wasn't really a decisive number 1, number 2 guy. But Landry had 138 targets for 83 receptions, 1,174 yards, and 6 touchdowns. OBJ had 133 targets for 74 receptions, 1,035 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So both of these guys, they were very average receivers, but they were drafted very high. There was a lot of hype, which I was part of the problem there. A lot of hype, a lot of potential on this offense. There was a lot of talk like it was going to be, the greatest offense we've ever seen. This and that. Look at all this talent. Look at this roster. But man, they really let you down for where you drafted them, especially fantasy draft. So look for these guys to slide. They didn't really perform badly. They were pretty average, but they may be a sweet pickup for you pretty late in the draft just because people don't want to touch them. I mean, whatever. Bright spots on the defense were Joe Schobert, linebacker, Mac Wilson, linebacker. He was a rookie. He's also my IDP sleeper. Sheldon Richardson, defensive tackle. He's another IDP prospect I'd look at picking up. Denzel Ward, he's a very young cornerback, very talented, another IDP prospect. Greedy Williams and Myles Garrett, the other half of Weezy's concussion equation.
Exactly.
I think I just read what was it a week or two ago that he was reinstated. Everything was good for him to go. So
yes.
Hopefully Duke can control himself and his wild swinging arms, but we'll see.
Wasn't his fault.
Their free agents are going to be Demarius Randall, Joe Schobert, as I mentioned a minute ago. I think they need to re-sign him. Rashard Higgins, wide receiver. Ricky Seals-Jones, tight end. And Kareem Hunt, which I already talked about him a little bit. I really think he's coming back. But hopefully, like I said, he can go somewhere else where he can really be used. And he would be, if he were on another team at their RB1, he would be a good sleeper fantasy pickup for sure.
Bucks.
Hey, that's a great fit. It really is. Free agent targets, guys I think they need to look at, guys who have had some talk and some that I just threw in here myself that I think they need to listen about. Austin Hooper, tight end out of Atlanta. Corey Littleton, I mentioned him when I was talking about the Ravens a minute ago. Linebacker for the Rams. Arik Armstead, we've talked about, Queasy and I know for sure have talked about him going to several different teams. Dude's going to want some money. Everybody wants him.
Exactly.
He is a defensive end for the 49ers. Clinton Dix, safety for the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Harris, who Jeremy talked about a minute ago. Oh, wait, no, that was Chris Harris. Anthony Harris, free safety for Minnesota. Wrong Harris. Case Keenum, I've seen this floating around, and that's interesting considering that Baker Mayfield was a number 1 draft pick 2 seasons ago. You could probably get Keenum pretty cheap. I don't know how I feel about this, but it's just out there, so I'm bringing it up.
All right.
Anthony Costanzo, offensive tackle. Jack Conklin, offensive tackle. Brandon Sheriff, guard. And Joe Thuney, guard, because they really need some those are some guys I threw in there. They really need some offensive line help really bad. In the draft, they have the 10th pick overall in the first round. They have second round, 2 third rounds, a 4th round, a 6th round, and a 7th round. And for their first pick, I have them taking Mekhi Becton, an offensive tackle out of Louisville. I've seen a lot of talk about this guy. The fan base really seems to like this guy. They're kind of pushing for him. I mean, I'm seeing it everywhere. So this is one of those things like the Joe Burrow. Oh yeah, this is probably definitely going to happen, but of course they're going to screw his last minute and trade their pick away or something.
Probably.
And for their second pick, I have them taking Jordan Brooks, a linebacker out of Texas Tech, and that's pick number 41. Fantasy value. Nick Chubb was the Browns' best fantasy weapon in 2019, so look for his ADP to jump a few picks for 2020, where I would say he looks to repeat. Dude's a monster. Baker Mayfield was the third or fourth quarterback taken off the board in 2019 due to his flashy promise in late 2018, which I jumped on this ship and it hurt me. I sold him quick. Sorry, Travis.
Hey, he made it to the playoffs.
He did make it to the playoffs. I saw things going downhill for Baker Mayfield, and I'm like, oh look, he's still in commercials on TV. Somebody will buy him. But anyway, he was a huge bust, and look for him to fall in 2020. With new offensive coaching staff and hopefully a refreshed line, maybe he can be a deep sleeper target. I think people are going to let him sit for a while, and if he sits long enough, I'll take anybody. But don't reach for this guy. And definitely watch for offensive line changes before you look at picking him up, definitely. OBJ and Landry both saw average production, as I alluded to earlier. So their ADP will take a hit, and maybe they'll be able to be picked up late. Kareem Hunt may also be a potential sleeper if he stays with the team or if he goes somewhere else. I mean, you just gotta look at what the coaching staff may potentially be wanting to do with him, or what happens to him in free agency, which is coming up here in a couple of days now. Mm-hmm. So everybody kind of sitting on Kareem Hunt watch. Look for the new coaching staff to run the ball heavily and to try to replicate the successful Vikings offense from last season. Not saying it's gonna happen, but they're gonna try. I'm giving them an 8-8 record for 2020 only because I like Stefanski. He seems like he's a very balanced dude, very level-headed, and I think he'll have an easier time getting control of that locker room than Freddie Kitchens did. And you guys got anything?
Yeah, I got something. So Baker Mayfield, you said he got sacked how many times? Like 40, 42 or something like that?
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson got sacked 39 times.
Yeah.
I think there's just a real big drop-off, personally, in my opinion. I think it's a big drop-off in philosophy. So hopefully that new OC can maybe change something up for them, because they've obviously have the offensive weapons. They scored, 335 points, which wasn't terrible, but it was very far behind that 531 that the Ravens had. And you could tell that he was frustrated. And I don't know if it was coaching staff or his line or just because they were playing crappy, but he made no qualms in his interviews and stuff after games to be a prick to everybody. And he was very upset and made it known. So I hope he can change that around. Like you said, people, they reached for him so high. Yeah. But I think he has the potential to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And, I hope the Browns can do something. I hate seeing a franchise being down for as long as they have been. And believe it or not, with such a bad season, it's one of their better seasons in the past 2 decades. So hopefully they can figure something out, especially with all the stars they brought in. So that's my take on it.
Well, I mean, not everybody can be San Francisco. The turnaround is very slow for some teams. But it's a start. I'll say that. There were a lot of things they did this season that I just did not agree with. That was just, I don't know if it was terrible coaching or a player decision or what, but definitely the difference in Lamar Jackson taking 38, 39 sacks and Baker Mayfield taking 40 is Lamar Jackson is extremely mobile. When that pocket, if the pocket started to break down before the play could develop, Lamar Jackson's getting 15 yards out of it, And I think a lot of defenses rushed him because of that. They were like, oh, we can't let this guy get by us. Our CBs are going to have to cover for a minute. And I think it's a different defensive philosophy whenever you're going at a team, when you're going at the Ravens versus when you're going at the Browns. So I don't look at the sacks quite the same. But if we're talking statistics, you're right. They're very close.
Hey, did you happen to say how much they had in cap space? I must have missed it, or do you know how much it was?
I wrote it down. Maybe I didn't say it.
I just wonder while you're looking, because I know their defense. Like we look at that offense with the stars and stuff and the moves they made, and we think, well, they just blew up, but really their defense was kind of stinky. Like they weren't very good.
They've got a decent amount in cap space. I wrote it down. I skipped right over it. $67.6 million.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
If they make a couple of these cuts with, I mean, because there's a lot of guys I listed off that aren't really necessary for this defense, that aren't really doing anything to help them. And they make a couple of cuts, they might can bump that up a little bit.
Is that what you would do? Is that what you would do with that cap space? Is like mainly focus on defense to try to? Because I mean, you've got talent on the offense, but your defense. They gave up 393, and that's towards the league bottom too. So somebody has to be.
I believe it was
stable side. So yeah.
I believe they were 22nd in defense. They have the offensive weapons. I mean, I can't state it enough, though. They need an offensive line so bad. And those offensive line guys, they're very expensive.
Yes, they are.
So maybe you're looking for going young and fresh in the draft with your defense. I mean, I named off a couple of guys they could potentially go after that wouldn't be super expensive, that could have shorter contracts, a little older guys. I named off a couple of those. And that would still leave you some space here in another season or two whenever you have to re-sign a lot of these younger guys to where you could still play with it, could still work around it. But I think maybe I would look to mix it up a little bit, maybe a little offensive line in the draft and free agency, maybe a little defense in the draft and free agency. But as far as your skill position players go, I wouldn't touch a one.
Okay. I just got one more thing to add. I know. Hopefully there's some viewers that really like history on football, like I do. I love watching the old NFL games and the history and stuff. I watch it on NFL Network all the time. And just recently I watched one on Paul Brown, and he's the reason they're named the Browns. And you go look at it, man. That dude was amazing. He was an innovator. He's the first person to put the little shortwave radio in helmets. He did that like 60, 70 years ago. And then there was they kept getting interference. It's pretty funny, but he also is the one that invented face masks. That dude was fantastic, and if you like history, just go check him out. It's amazing, and it's good to know if you're a football fan.
Real good to know.
You got anything for me, Queasy?
Do you think Baker Mayfield will try to step up and try to be within that top 10 tier of quarterbacks next year?
No, he's not going to be a top 10. I think he'll drop in your fantasy draft. I think he'll drop to maybe a probably 20th quarterback taken. He just screwed so many people this past season, and he may perform better than that. But I mean, like if they really if they overhauled this offensive line and really got control of that locker room, then potentially top 15. But I'm not. No.
And I know the NFL has high hopes for him. Of course, that's why you see a lot of them on commercials and things like that. But it is the Cleveland Browns, as I always say. And I never see that franchise. They haven't shown me potential to turn around. But if they do, this will be the time to do it while you have Baker Mayfield on a rookie contract. So this will be the time to develop your team.
Yeah, which is why I completely disagree with the whole Case Keenum thing. He is still on a rookie contract. You got to give him more time. You just brought in a new head coach. Don't go trying to pull Case Keenum away and just take a hit to your salary cap. But
exactly,
it's not a pretty situation, but it's a better situation than they were in 2 seasons ago. So
that's true. I've got one more thing for you, Andrew. So since you're a Georgia boy and they've got probably their best player right now, fantasy-wise, and one of the better running backs, and Nick Chubb. Where would you put him fantasy coming up?
He'd be in my second tier in fantasy draft. You got your Christian McCaffrey. You got your Saquon Barkley. And as far as running backs go, I probably wouldn't put anybody else in that top tier right now. But then after that, you got your Ezekiel Elliott, your Nick Chubb, possibly your Derrick Henry, guys like that I would take mid to late first round, early second round if they're still there. Grab them up.
Yeah.
But like I said, his ADP last season was the end of the first round. and he may jump to mid first round because of his production. But we'll see.
I got you. That's about where I have him too.
He's gonna be my first pick.
Georgia boy, Bulldog.
Oh no, for real. I do love Nick Chubb though. He's a very, very quiet dude. Did you guys see when he was mic'd up? That episode when he was mic'd up?
No, I missed
Oh,
it.
I didn't.
I wish I.
Yeah, you can look it up on YouTube, and like you hear everybody around him talking, and he's just breathing heavy. That's like the whole thing.
He was tired. He's carrying that team, man, at the time.
All right, but yeah, man, I'm done. Jeremy, if you wanna move on to the Bengals.
Yeah, so I'll wrap this AFC North up here with the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's even hard to get it out of your mouth because they were 2-14. So they were the worst team in the NFL. I know for a long time people thought it was going to be Miami because they were winless. Cincinnati was winless, and who was going to get that first round pick? People were talking about tanking for Tua forever with Miami, and anyway, it ended up being Cincinnati. I don't think anybody was tanking. They're just a really bad football team.
Exactly.
They had brought in a new head coach, Zach Taylor. It was his first year. Just a little bit about him. He was the starting quarterback for Nebraska in 2005 and 2006. He was undrafted. He joined the Canadian Football League with the Blue Bombers, and he was like their fourth string quarterback for a season. And then he decided, like, I'm not going to be a player for very long, so I might as well be a coach. He was a grad assistant from 2008 to 2011 with Texas A&M. So that's where he got his start. He went up to the pros, was an assistant quarterback coach for the Dolphins. And then in 2013 to 2015, he took that role on solo. He was quarterback coach then because they were so good during 2013, 2015. 2016, he went back down to college, offensive coordinator and quarterback coach for the Cincinnati Bearcats. 2017 was like his big gold star. He got on with the Rams and their good run as their assistant wide receiver coach. And then in 2018, he became their quarterback coach for the Rams. So he kind of made a parallel move. So when the Rams were doing their thing there. And then I guess from that, everybody was trying to get a piece of the Rams at that point in time. So Cincinnati said, let me get it. And they got it with 2-14. So he's kind of unknown. His coaching tree to me is not that impressive. And this is what he gave you in your first year. So this is what they were doing as a franchise to get these wins. Offensive coordinator is Brian Callahan. Defensive coordinator is Arumo. Hope I said that right. We'll just move on from their coaching because they have so many issues. I mean, which is obvious. 2-14 team. I mean, you name an issue, you could probably just list them all out and get a dart and throw it. And yeah, it's true. I mean, even as a franchise, like I've got stuff going back. Like since 1968, they've had 27 losing seasons. The last time they were 2-14 was 2002. They haven't won a playoff game since Paul Brown's son Mike Brown took over in 1991. Let me say that again. They haven't won a playoff game. They've been to the playoffs, but they haven't won a playoff game since 1991. I was 4 years old. I'm now 32. Okay. So they don't know how to win in Cincinnati. I hate it for you. If you're a Cincinnati Bengal fan, I hate it for you. It's not good. One of the issues they did have last season was that coach. They hired him very late. So he got a late start, which isn't good for a first-year head coach, especially a guy that's never really had even many coaching responsibilities before. His coaching staff, because of that, was even assembled later. I think most of that was because they were trying to go after other guys that either didn't want to come or ended up going other places. So it kind of put them in a real tough spot. They did lose a lot of their talent last year, which does attribute to the 2-14. So it may not all be the coaching staff or front office or ownership or whatever you want to point to. They lost 3 of their starting offensive linemen. They lost A.J. Green, which is by far their best receiver. They've been dubbed as being in rebuild mode because they just have so many issues. I've got down as one of their issues is they have $46.6 million in their cap, so it's not really a lot, especially when you have so many issues that you do need to address on your depth chart. a little piece of information. AJ Green franchise tagged. He's going to get paid $18.5 million for that. So that's probably a good move for them, seeing as he just came off that season-ending injury and he is starting to get a little long in the tooth, a little bit older. No doubt he's talented, but not real sure what he's going to be when he comes back. And I know they wanted that guy for whoever they bring in at quarterback in the draft, which is where they're expected to go. A couple of free agents of note is AJ Green, which they just, like I said, they just fixed him up with that franchise tag. Darquez Denard, cornerback. Tyler Eifert, he's one of their veteran tight ends. Nick Vigil, linebacker, kind of middle tier guy. Kerry Wynn, defensive end. John Jerry, guard. Leroy Reynolds, a linebacker. Just to mention a few that they'll have to take a look at. Personally, before I get into my little GM role that I've been liking to do here lately, they did have Andy Dalton as well when I talk about their issues. They started off 0-8. They couldn't really get anything going and ended up benching him for their rookie Ryan Finley to kind of look to see what they had for the future, which isn't really a bad move. I know fans hate to see it, but when you're that bad, I mean, you have to kind of look to see what you got. And Ryan Finley, he didn't do well, so he's probably not your future. Go figure. Andy Dalton, they are actively trying to trade him and or cut him. I don't think it'll save too much if they cut him outright, but if they trade him, it would save him $17.7 million. Dre Kirkpatrick, I know he's probably one of their better defenders, but since you're in a rebuild mode, it would save you $8.3 million. Cordy Glenn, just to run through a couple of cuts I would do. Cordy Glenn, $9.5 million. Sean Williams, $4 million. B.W. Webb, $2.5 million. And that would get that $46.6 million in cap space. It'd get it up to $88.7. You can make some real nice moves. And the guys that I would go after would be Joe Thuney from New England, the guard. He would be a real good addition. He'd be a real good addition for that offensive line. And then a couple of guys I'd look at defense, and I'll say why. I really look at defense with this team first and foremost. Would be I'd look at Joe Schobert, who you were just talking about, Andrew, at linebacker. If Cleveland does let him go, I would definitely take him. I'd also look at Corey Littleton. Maybe you take both of those guys so that you can shore up that front seven with a couple of good linebackers. Which I like him a lot, by the way, Corey Littleton. And Carl Joseph at safety, I think would be another good guy that's a free agent. Just kind of get that go ahead. I don't know. I didn't look at rankings as far as where they landed, but 420 points against the Bengals. So if it's not last, it's got to be like 31st. It's got to be super close. So, so they were bad on defense. As far as the draft goes, so I think everybody's been seeing it. Round one, pick one overall because they were the worst team. Everybody's looking at Mr. Joe Burrow, record-setting quarterback out of LSU, Heisman winner, all kinds of leads out the butt. Not a whole lot of negative things to say about the kid. Cool Joe, I like to think about that where he's sitting before a press conference and he's sitting, I think it's the SEC championship game, and he's smoking that cigar. He does kind of look like Macaulay Culkin, which is fun to make fun of him a little. But there has been a lot of talk that he doesn't want to go to Cincinnati, which I don't think many people would blame him. But I think he's also come out and publicly said, which is a smart move in my opinion, that he'll play wherever he gets drafted. Yeah. I mean, if you were the player that was going first overall and you had a good career ahead of you, would you want to go play for Cincinnati? I wouldn't. But anyway, so I do have them taking Joe Burrow first overall. And then I have round 2, pick 33, because we've looked at the defense and free agency going after the offense and getting a receiver, either Laviska Shenault, that wide receiver out of Colorado, or Denzel Mims, if he falls to them. I think is a very underrated wide receiver out of Baylor. And then round 3, a guy that you had mentioned, Andrew, was Malik Harrison out of Ohio State. They also have they only have one pick in each round, so I didn't go into round 4, 5, 6, and 7. But I would imagine they'd continue to try to go after some guys that develop, probably linemen and defensive guys. As far as fantasy goes, AJ Green, I think people probably try to reach for him because of his name and the fact that he's been so good. I would look at him because he's such a risk coming back, and you don't know how Burrow's going to do. Mm-hmm. I'd look at taking him second or third, like probably more like third round. More than likely somebody's going to reach and he's going to be gone, and they're probably going to get burnt for it. The only good thing I would say is obviously he's a very talented receiver, and Cincinnati's probably going to be behind in a lot of games, and they're going to throw. So that's one thing. He may have the volume. Yeah. Joe Mixon's another guy. If they can get the offense clicking, Joe Mixon's a very undervalued, underrated running back. Has the potential to be one of those top tier guys, a top 5 guy if he's put in the right system. So hopefully they get that going. Maybe they bring in Burrow and he's amazing, and maybe they're just clicking and, you never know. Tyler Boyd was one of their best fantasy wide receivers. There's nobody really that's fantastic, obviously, because they had such a bad season. If like John Ross, people always want to talk about John Ross because he was so fast, but he's not a good receiver in the NFL right now. There's a high drop rate. He's very fast, but that's all you really can say about him. So he's not even draftable unless you're in a dynasty league or like an incredible super flex league, and you just need a flyer somewhere any given week. On IDP leagues, like we like to play, you got the safety Jesse Bates III. He was a beast. Sean Williams was not bad. Nick Vigil was a middle tier linebacker. He at the top of his career was a decent IDP option. And of course, if they take Joe Burrow, he'll also probably get overvalued. But I would look at him late if you like to go that route of taking a quarterback late. He might surprise some people. Having said that, I don't have anything else to say about Cincinnati, but how crazy would it be, just to bring it up for fun, if Joe Burrow did not get taken first or Cincinnati traded out, which I don't think would be a terrible thing if they actually traded out of that first spot to, say, Miami at 5, and they took a defender, and they would have a couple picks, maybe if they get another couple picks, and they took a quarterback later on. I don't think it would be terrible. Because, no matter what, you got to look at, in the draft, you have to get better. You make your team better. And Joe Burrow could definitely do that for you, but you need a lot to get better than 2-14. So anyway,
I understand that. I understand that, but you did go. So if you did take Burrow, that means you were going to stay with Andy Dalton, correct?
If I did not
take Burrow.
If I do take Burrow.
If you do not take Burrow.
Okay. No, I'd still get rid of him. Actually, I really don't think Andy Dalton was a problem. You still get your quarterback in the future there. I think you could still go and get like a Jordan Love or a Herbert or somebody. Yeah.
No, you just spoke of getting a defensive player at that pick at 5, I guess it is.
I think they would need multiple firsts.
Let me ask you a question.
They're not going to trade out. They're not going to trade out for like the 3rd or 5th pick just to trade there. They're going to get more first-round picks. Miami's got 3 first-round picks, so they're not just gonna swap picks because that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I'm so confused. I don't know who this Andy Dalton guy is. Who are you talking about?
That is the Red Rocket.
Okay. Red Rocket. I'm good now. My bad, dog.
Yeah, he's the Red Rocket. He's the Red Rocket.
Well, man,
the Ginger Gunner.
The Ginger Gunner. So what are we gonna call? What are we gonna call Joe Burrow? We gotta give him a Cincinnati nickname.
I don't know.
The Tiger Rocket.
I don't know. Dude's home alone in Cincinnati. That's all I know.
Home Alone. I love it. Home Alone.
I do think they got to get Burrow at number 1. It's like too much pressure to replace the quarterback right now, and you have the opportunity to get the best. I think they will take the best. With saying that, also, 2 things. More of a statement than a question. Their coach. Obviously, this is a coach that hasn't had a huge history behind him as far as being a winning coach or a top coach or anything like that. And also, the Cincinnati Bengals is known, as you just stated earlier, to have a long history of losing. So are they really trying to win or just filling in spots, if that makes sense?
I think at this point, I mean, yeah, they're trying to win, but I would say, like, I really think that bringing in him, I think he was like not even their first full page of options. I think it just fell so badly with that management that they couldn't coerce anybody to come in and take him, and that's where they're with him. And they just, it's not a tempting place to be in any facet. That's why no coach, no reputable coach wanted to go there. Why would you? You look at what they have in pieces. They didn't have anybody.
And I understand that completely, and that's a good defense for them. But you have at least 10 teams in the NFL that you can try to steal offensive coordinators from. If not that, you have a good 20 teams in college that would love a chance, coaches wise, love a chance to probably be an NFL coach. That would have a better record than what this guy has shown.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you. I know if I was I put myself in like a young coach role somewhere as a coordinator or whatever, and somebody said, "Hey, you want to come be the coach of the Bengals?" I mean, you have to have huge balls to go take on that job. And then you look at it. I mean, like I said, kind of at one point, I know I was bashing their coaching staff, and we're all kind of right now because they're 2-14, and he has no history whatsoever of being a winner. But they did have a lot of injuries. And if you were to look at that and say, okay, who's my best 3 players? Before that season, it would have been A.J. Green, Andy Dalton, Joe Mixon. I mean, you'd maybe sprinkle in a little Tyler Eifert, and then you'd go defense and look at whatever. But and then you have several of those players get hurt, and then you have to start making moves. I mean, like I mentioned, they're in a rebuild now. Yeah. I don't think at all and you could probably make this as a defense for you or a point to your more to your point about them not wanting to win. I think what they're really wanting to do right now is I don't think they even have expectations of being able to be in the running to win their division, but they want to start making those steps. And you do that with a Burrow and, with a good draft. So I hope they have some good talent evaluators to bring in good linemen and everybody else because, it's not like when they do bring in people, they're going to be there forever. Everybody has rookie contracts, and they're usually about 4 years, 3 to 4 years. And they've got to have something in place by then. So dude might be gone by then. If he puts up another 2-14 season, but at the same time, who are you going to hire?
Exactly. I understand.
Who wants to be there? Anyway. What you got, Andrew?
A couple points. One, I definitely agree with Queasy. It's less about the talent and more about the culture change. You've got to change your culture. And maybe that's something they saw in this guy that he can potentially do. I mean, obviously not in this first season. I mean, everything kind of went wrong. Your quarterback was terrible. Your offensive line was bad. First half of the season, they didn't know how to use Joe Mixon. And, I mean, A.J. Green injured. Your defense was awful. I mean, dude didn't step into a good situation. So, I mean, I guess we'll give him some time and see what happens. He's relatively unproven, like you said. I agree with that point. And to Jeremy's point, I mean, you're right. Who would want to step into this situation if you are a young head coach looking for your shot? I mean, the Bengals could potentially ruin your coaching future because people are always going to see that big dark spot on your resume.
Yep. You're right.
And the other point I have is give me every share of Joe Mixon that I can afford. He's my Jalen Hurts of running backs. give me Joe Mixon. The second half of the season, from week 8 on, they really started making this offense revolve around him. They didn't win a whole lot of games, but as far as fantasy goes, he really, really stepped up. He was top notch, and I think he's one of the best running backs in the NFL in one of the worst situations.
I definitely think so.
Yeah, but that's what I got on the Bengals. Not really much of a question. There's not a whole lot to question here. You see where they're headed, where they've been.
Yeah, they're just bad. They're bad across the board.
I think they've got some speed on that offensive side of the ball. Maybe they'll use that to their advantage and try to look like Kansas City or something. But you got to have the right quarterback.
That's kind of why I talked about talent evaluators a little bit too, is because you're right. They do have a lot of speed, but speed doesn't always translate into wins or even production. If you go and look at the 40 times, like your best 40 times from the combine, and then go look at production, those guys are nowhere to be found because speed doesn't exactly translate. Even myself, I get caught up in that 40. I want to see it. I want to know who's the fastest. But your slower guys that are running like 2 seconds slower are usually your better guys. Jerry Rice, Michael Irvin, Randy Moss. These guys did not run fast 40s, and they're Hall of Famers.
Got to have hands.
You got to have them hand, and you got to have it up here. Plus, those fast guys, they get hurt a lot.
Sure.
Because they want to be the fastest.
All right. My last word on the Cincinnati Bengals, To me, my number one priority to change the culture around there would be to bring back Vontez Perfect.
Bring him
Number
back.
one.
Hey
Oh,
man,
Vontaze
he's the
Burfict.
guy. He was the guy who was telling old AB to chill out.
Yeah, exactly.
The blind leading the blind right there. Yo, man, you got to calm down. What are you doing? Hit
Richie
me up. Oh, we need to talk. Let me
Yeah,
show you how to
Richie
run your life.
Incognito over there giving them both a pep talk. You guys are wild.
Hey, that should have been our sign right there that something like the coronavirus is about to hit because stuff's going sideways. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Up is down, down is up. The only thing that hasn't changed is the Bengals still lose.
Exactly.
Take this. This is for the Bengals franchise, by the
I'll
way.
feel you.
R.I.P.
I'll keep one with you.
I'll wait for you. R.I.P. Bengals. I mean, I really hope that Burrow does get chosen number 1 overall and that he is like a phenom and he really turns them around because I hate seeing any team being bottom and always being bottom. I hate that.
I'm saying.
So I'd like to see that, even though I'm not really a Bengal fan.
Yep, with Jeremy. R.I.P. Bengals.
R.I.P. Bengals.
There's no music with that one. It was solemn.
All right, one thing I know we did not get to is the mailbag at the beginning of the show.
Yep.
Now we got 1 or 2 questions. I'll leave that up to you, Andrew.
Interact with the guys. Time for listener mail.
I don't have them written down.
All right. Well, I told Ryan personally that I would be taking care of this one. This is Ryan at @the_kid125. And I told him I was going to jump on this one because it was Lamar Jackson related. I had the Ravens today. And then I'll get your feedback, guys. Will Lamar Jackson have another MVP season in 2020? Now, if you're talking about MVP of the league, I don't know. I think he'll be right up there in the talk all the way through the very end of the season. But I think there's potential for upset. I mean, like, as Jeremy spoke on earlier, there are going to be teams that have kind of figured him out a little bit and found ways to slow him down, and they're going to have to find other ways to move the ball aside from just Jackson with his stupid speed. I mean, that dude is so fast.
Yeah.
But I would say there's probably I'd give him a 50% chance of actually winning MVP again. I mean, you got your really good running backs, you got your really good quarterbacks that are rising up right now. Your Patrick Mahomes, I think, would be another contender, maybe potentially the only other quarterback that could beat him out.
Russell Wilson
was in the talks, but man, he's starting to get up there a little bit, and I'm concerned about what they have at receiver in Seattle. So I know they have that rookie that came on last year, Metcalf. He was really their only dude. I mean, nobody else was helping this guy out. But we'll see. I would give him a 50% chance, if I had to put a number on it, of actually having another MVP season.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in and say that it's higher than that. I think Lamar Jackson, even when teams have looked at him and they may think they know how to break him down, just in his pure athleticism. So that was always what everybody always talked about with Lamar Jackson was, oh, he's so athletic. He should be a receiver because he's so athletic instead of a quarterback. And he squashed that pretty quick with his arm. Like, if you go and look at just his throws, he did fantastic. But I want to take a look at this clip of this insane spin move he put on some guys right here. And this is why he'll be the MVP. So yes, as a long answer shortened down, yes, he'll be the MVP.
Lamar Jackson catch or pass completion. Here's Lamar on a run.
Jackson himself. Look at him turn back and forth. Oh, he broke his ankles. Now he's got an entourage, and he's got a touchdown. He is Houdini. What a play! 47-yard touchdown run by the magical quarterback Lamar Jackson.
I don't think he'll be the MVP. That's just taking the field over him. I think he will be up there in the talks. But I do hope he continues to develop. I think he has the potential to. I think the team believes in him. I think the coaching staff is great. So he has everything behind him to become a great team and a great player. So, again, as long as he continues to develop and not just settle like, I'm good enough, as long as he continues to grow, I think his chances will continue to grow.
Well, you're looking at a quarterback who definitely identified his weak points And in the offseason last year, he hired Tom Brady's passing coach, his passing game coach, and they worked together to improve his accuracy and maybe a little bit of his arm strength, and worked on some stuff like that, and it showed. And if you're right, Queasy, if he continues to do this, he's going to be unstoppable. Yes. He and Patrick Mahomes are going to be in a different level.
Yes.
And which is where I think they sit right now. But, I mean, they can really start to separate themselves.
Exactly.
Nope. So thank you, Ryan, for that question. Friend of the show. I always appreciate it. Keep them coming. I do have the other one, which was another friend of the show, Alan Bug. He had asked, and I'll direct this mainly to you, Queasy, because you covered him. Okay. Will James Conner have a better year? And I know you talked a little bit about it, but that's what he wants to know. Will James Conner have a better season?
Again, better, definitely will be better because he was riddled with injuries last year. He'll be very consistent with the Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh is known to be a running team. So better, yes, but will he leap and being the big talks of the top 5 running backs? No. I think he'll be very consistent though next year.
No doubt.
Would you give him a top 10 finish on the season next year with barring injury?
I will. I can say that much. Again, they're known to be a running team. A lot of running backs will probably tail off. So I will put him in that top 10. I'm strong enough to believe in him and then in that team to say that he will be in the top 10 on the running backs.
No doubt.
I personally like James Conner the person a lot, but James Conner the running back, I'm not super high on him. Matter of fact, I really like the guys behind him a little better than I like him. I really like Benny Snell. I've been a huge fan of Benny Snell. I'd say he got drafted late. I'm going to say he was a steal for the Steelers. But we'll see how it pans out this season. Hopefully they get him a little bit of usage. But I hope James Conner has a good season. If anybody deserves it, it's him. But
yeah, there's so many factors that's dealing with the Pittsburgh Steelers that's going to affect whether his season next year, whether it's going to be good up, down, or left or right. So
sure.
We will see how it turns out.
I like, Andrew, how you basically just gave him like Mr. Personality Award.
I did. Dude's been through a lot.
He has. I'd give him like a ceiling for Conner would be like a 10 to 12 range for this upcoming season, fantasy-wise. More likely he's going to be that 16 to 20 guy.
Okay,
personally. That's where I feel he's going to be. I haven't done my fantasy rankings, but that's where I feel like he's going to fall. So
you're probably right, especially with the rookies that's coming in. Probably 2 strong rookies, excluding Swift. But they do have a good, strong rookie core that's coming in as far as running back, so that will probably drop him.
Yeah, and it really depends, too. Like, if the Steelers go and take a good running back, but that might help him, actually, but we'd see. It takes some workload away. All right. That's what I've got. That's what you've got.
All right, guys.
Another shot.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. 2 last things, if I may say. What happened to J.J. Watt?
Where'd he go?
He fell.
Hey, he's gone.
He fell. He's not getting put back up.
He was attacking Andrew as he fell, and he rolled his ankle up, and now he's sitting on the.
He attacked me. He attacked me because he wasn't one of my fantasy IDP options. It kind of pissed him off.
Exactly. And my last thing, did you guys see the video of Diggs practicing in a Arizona Cardinals shirt?
Oh, no.
That's like Stephon Diggs was practicing in Arizona. Again, I don't know. I didn't look much into this, but seeing this, I'm like, I don't know. What is he doing? Of course, he's been wanting out of the Vikings, but I mean that's pretty disrespectful if that did happen in that way.
That would be a sexy pairing to that offense, though. Definitely.
If they were to draft a couple receivers and get, I mean, they run that 4 and 5 wide set. If they had all those talented guys out there, I'd freak out as a defensive coordinator personally.
This is something to watch for sure. I'm glad you brought this up. I haven't seen this. I'll check it out.
I'd also definitely want Murray at quarterback for my fantasy team. He'd be up high.
Yes. R.I.P. J.J. Watt.
That poor fella.
That's okay. I'm gonna find a Deshaun Watson to put up there. Don't worry, guys.
There you go.
But
everybody, Wash your hands.
Wash your
Wash your
hands.
hands.
And,
Get your toilet paper.
Thank all you clean people for tuning in to another episode of the 3-Point Conversion. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and find our podcast wherever you can find it. Spotify, Google Podcast. I mean, we everywhere, cuz.
We're everywhere.
And as we say around here, go for 3.
Go for 3.
Go for 3, baby.
Make sure to follow the 3-Point Conversion host on Twitter.
Blue at Rastalion1131, Jeremy at Checkerboard J, Andrew at Jedi Quarterback.